Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in the kingdom, I did not come here today to entertain your emotions. I came to remind your spirit that you were born by love, sustained by grace, and called for purpose. You are not an accident, you are not a mistake, you are not a random event. You are the product of intentional divine love. God's love is the source of all purpose. Before anything existed, before light pierced darkness, before stars danced in the sky, before the earth was formed, love already was. Love is not a byproduct of creation, it is the reason creation exists. When God decided to create man, he didn't do it out of boredom or obligation. He did it out of divine affection and intention. You and I were not created just to exist. We were created to express God's love, to receive his love, and to reflect it in everything we do. God's love is not sentimental. It is foundational. It is not shallow. It is strategic. It is the very reason you are alive. Every purpose that lies inside you, every gift that stirs in your soul, every calling that tugs on your heart, it all originates from the love of God. Love formed your identity. Love wrote your blueprint. Love is the original motivation of your existence. You see, if you don't understand God's love, you will search for purpose in performance. You will measure your value by achievements, relationships, titles, or approval. But when you realize you were already loved before you ever performed, you stop striving and start living. You stop chasing worth and you start walking in it. The world says, prove yourself to be accepted. But God says, you are accepted. Now walk in who I made you to be. God's love is not reactive, it's proactive. He didn't start loving you the moment you got it right. He loved you when you were lost, when you were broken, when you were hiding. And even when you turned your back on him, his love never withdrew its hand from you. His love doesn't wait for you to be clean. It steps into your mess and brings you out. This is why your purpose is safe in his love, because his love sees beyond your failures and calls out your future. His love is not intimidated by your weakness. It's the very power that carries you through it. So when God says, I have plans for you, he's not guessing. He's declaring the truth that was written about you before time began. His love authored your destiny, and if he wrote it in love, he will fulfill it in grace. You are not the result of a random sequence of events. You are not here to merely survive. You are here to represent the one who loved you into existence. God's love is not just a comfort. It is a commission. It sends you into the world with identity, authority, and purpose. When you understand that, you no longer live beneath your calling. You rise into the fullness of who you are. And that, my friend, is why speaking about God's love is not just inspirational. It is transformational. Because when people discover that the very reason they breathe is because love chose them, they stop asking, why am I here? And start declaring, now I know why I was sent. Grace is heaven's legal access to earthly transformation. It is not just a divine favor floating in the clouds. It is the very mechanism by which God reclaims, reforms, and realigns your life back to its original intent. Grace is not a feeling God has about you. It is the power he gives to you. And until we understand grace as more than a religious cliché, we will continue to treat it as a crutch instead of a key. Grace is heaven's official intervention in a fallen system. When man fell in the garden, the kingdom was not surprised, but neither was it defeated. Grace stepped in as heaven's response to earth's rebellion. It is the legal way by which God restored what sin tried to destroy. Grace doesn't ignore sin, it confronts it with truth, and then empowers transformation. This is why grace must never be confused with tolerance. God is not tolerating your brokenness. He is transforming it. And he does it legally through grace, because everything God does is lawful. He does not bypass order to bless you. He establishes order so that the blessing can remain. Grace, then, is the divine authority God uses to override the verdict of sin without violating his own justice. But hear me, grace is not the absence of standards. It is the ability to live up to them. Grace doesn't weaken the call to holiness. It strengthens you to walk in it. It is not a loophole for failure. It is the power to fulfill your divine purpose even when you fall. That's why grace must be honored, not abused. Because grace cost heaven everything. And so, if you claim grace but remain unchanged, you have not encountered the grace of God, you've encountered a concept, not a person. Because true grace doesn't leave you where it found you. It lifts you, it matures you, it redirects you. Grace gives you the ability to say no to sin, yes to purpose, and yes to a life that reflects the King who gave you access. Grace is not cheap. It is the most powerful force ever released to humanity, because it does what no law, no system, no effort ever could. It changes the heart, it heals the soul, it restores dignity. Grace is not God lowering his standards, it is him raising you up to meet them. Grace is how heaven enters earth, not just to forgive, but to transform. And when grace takes root, everything begins to change, legally, powerfully, and permanently. You were chosen before you were born, before your mother held you, before your name was written on any document. Your existence was already written in eternity. You did not begin in the womb, you began in the mind of God. And that means your life is not a reaction to human circumstances. It is a decision made by divine intention. God does not wait for people to qualify before he chooses them. He qualifies those he already chose. He didn't choose you after your success. He chose you knowing your struggles. He saw your entire journey, your highs, your lows, your victories, your failures, and he still said that one is mine. You must understand that divine selection is not based on perfection. It is based on purpose. God saw beyond your flaws and focused on your function. Your past doesn't disqualify you. In the kingdom, your past is actually the canvas upon which God paints the story of redemption. Every broken place becomes proof of his mercy. Every mistake becomes a testimony of grace. You are not a product of what went wrong. You are the evidence of what God made right. The enemy will try to convince you that you are too far gone, that your decisions have cancelled your destiny, but how can you cancel what you didn't create? You are not the author. You are the assignment, and the one who called you is still committed to you. Being chosen means your life carries divine weight. You were not just saved to survive this world. You were sent to transform it. You are not random. You are not here by accident. God planted you in the earth with a purpose that existed before your body was formed. You must stop looking at yourself through the lens of shame and begin seeing yourself through the lens of selection. If God picked you before you were born, what makes you think your failure now can undo his plan? That is why grace is so powerful. It does not wait for you to be worthy. It works in spite of what disqualified you. Grace says, I knew what you would do, and I still chose you. You must never confuse being broken with being rejected. You can be bruised and still be chosen. You can be imperfect and still be effective. Because your calling is not based on your performance. It's based on his purpose. You were chosen before the world saw you, before religion could label you, before society could measure you. That means your identity is secure. You don't have to prove your worth when you know you were already picked. And when you begin to live from that revelation, everything about your posture changes. You stop begging for acceptance, and you start walking in assignment. Because those who are chosen understand that their past is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of grace in motion. Love is not an emotion, it's a law in the kingdom. In human terms, love often fluctuates with feelings. It comes and goes. It changes based on mood. It reacts to behavior. But in the kingdom of God, love is not optional. It is not circumstantial. It is a command. It is the very foundation upon which all of heaven's government operates. The kingdom does not function without love. You cannot represent a king whose nature is love and walk in hate, envy, bitterness, or pride. Love is not a suggestion. It is a spiritual law, binding and active, and every citizen of the kingdom is required to operate by it. When Jesus said, "By this all men will know you are my disciples, if you love one another," he didn't point to miracles, prophecies, or church attendance. He pointed to love. Why? Because love is the proof of kingdom culture. Love is the evidence that heaven is within you. Love is the standard by which spiritual maturity is measured. You can speak in tongues and still be immature if love is not active in your life. You can have gifts and still be disobedient to the culture of the king. And this kind of love is not weak. It's not soft. It's not sentimental. Kingdom love is fierce, disciplined, and consistent. It loves the unlovable. It honors the undeserving. It prays for enemies. It forgives those who wound. It is not controlled by emotion. It is driven by obedience. It does not require agreement to be extended. It simply requires alignment with the heart of God. This is why love must be more than language. Love is action. Love is sacrifice. Love is accountability. Love tells the truth even when it hurts. Love doesn't watch someone drift into destruction and say, "Well, I don't want to offend them." No, love rescues. Love corrects, love covers, but it also convicts. In the kingdom, love is the climate that allows righteousness to grow. Without it, every other law malfunctions. To walk in love is to walk in power, because love positions you in the center of God's will. When you walk in love, you disarm darkness, you confuse your enemies, you silence accusation. Love doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become powerful in the Spirit, because now your authority is rooted in the nature of the King. God is love. That's not just a description, that's an identity, and if He is love, then everything He does flows from that law. So to represent the King, we must adopt His law, not just when it's easy, not just when we feel like it, not just with people who agree with us, but with everyone, in every circumstance, at all times. Because love is not just what God gives, it's how His kingdom functions. If you do not walk in love, you are violating kingdom order, no matter how spiritual you look. And when you understand that, love is no longer a burden. It becomes your weapon. It becomes your witness. It becomes your mark. Because when heaven looks at the earth, it's not searching for who goes to church. It's searching for who lives like the King. Grace restores what sin tried to erase. Sin came into the world not just to break rules, but to sever relationship, to disconnect man from his divine identity, to distort purpose and damage the original blueprint God designed for humanity. Sin didn't just make man guilty, it made him forget who he was. It introduced shame, confusion, fear, and rebellion. It tried to erase the image of God from the soul of man, but grace entered the scene not to just forgive the action, but to recover the design. Where sin brought separation, grace brings reconciliation. Where sin whispered you're no longer worthy, grace declares you're still chosen. Grace does not ignore the damage, it reverses it. Grace doesn't pretend the fall didn't happen. It confronts the fall and says, even here I can rebuild. Sin came to destroy the evidence of who you are in God, but grace comes to restore the evidence with power, precision, and love. Grace reclaims what was lost. It reestablishes what was broken. It rewrites the story the enemy tried to end prematurely. You may have thought it was over, that your past decisions cancelled your future, but grace steps in with authority and says, I'm not done writing. The pen is still in God's hand, and He specializes in restoring ruined chapters into divine testimonies. You see, restoration is not a touch-up job. God doesn't patch holes. He makes all things new. Grace doesn't build on the foundation of shame. It tears it down and lays a new one in righteousness. And when God restores, He restores with interest. He brings back more than what you lost. He redeems time, relationships, dignity, vision, and purpose. What the enemy thought He erased, grace rewrites in bold letters. But restoration is not passive. It requires surrender. Grace will not restore what pride tries to hide. You must be willing to bring your brokenness to the one who can fix it. You must allow truth to confront the lie that says you are beyond repair. Because you are not, you never were. That's the power of grace. It sees beyond the dirt and pulls out the treasure. Sin may have buried your value, but grace is digging it back up. Sin may have shouted, you are finished, but grace responds, you are just beginning. Grace is not intimidated by your damage. It is designed for it. It does not weaken in the face of your history. It activates, because grace is not just God's kindness. It's His power to restore what never should have been lost. And if you let it, grace will rebuild every broken place in your life, not just to bring you back to where you were, but to move you forward into who you were always meant to become. You cannot speak what you don't believe, and you cannot manifest what you don't understand. Many people are trying to declare truth without ever encountering it. They are repeating religious phrases without revelation, quoting scriptures without conviction, and making declarations without alignment. But in the kingdom, authority does not come from repetition. It comes from revelation. What you speak must be born from what you believe, and what you believe must be rooted in what you know about the King. If you don't believe God loves you, you will struggle to love others. If you haven't received grace, your words will never carry grace. Your speech becomes powerful only when it flows from a place of intimacy, not imitation. This is why Jesus didn't speak from guesswork. He spoke from oneness with the Father. He said, "I only speak what I hear my Father say." That is not just obedience, that is relationship. He wasn't guessing God's will, he was living in it. So when he spoke, demons obeyed, storms ceased, the sick were healed, because his words were not just sounds. They were expressions of divine understanding. Too many people are trying to speak kingdom results without a kingdom connection. But God does not authorize empty voices. Heaven responds to agreement, not volume. You can shout and declare all day, but if your life is not aligned with what you're saying, your words carry no spiritual weight. You must live the truth before you can declare it with authority. You cannot represent a grace you don't walk in. You cannot proclaim a love you haven't embraced. You cannot command freedom when you're still in chains. That's why before you speak, you must believe. Before you declare, you must receive. This is not about being perfect, it's about being persuaded. When you are fully persuaded of God's love, your voice begins to carry healing. When you are convinced of His grace, your words release breakthrough. When the truth is alive in you, you don't just recite it, you release it. Because truth has a frequency, and when you're aligned with it, everything around you starts to respond. This is why your daily walk matters. Your time in the Word, your time in prayer, your moments of worship. These are not rituals. They are moments of divine alignment. They are how you root yourself in what is true, so that when you speak, you are not hoping. It is coming from a place of knowing. And that kind of speech carries creative power, because now your words are not empty. They are full of heaven's substance. When you truly understand who God is and who you are in Him, you don't speak from fear. You speak from faith. You don't speak to impress. You speak to impact. You are not echoing noise. You are releasing truth that transforms, and when truth flows from conviction, it cuts through darkness. It builds up, it breaks chains, it brings life, because the kingdom does not advance through noise. It advances through revelation spoken in authority. So now we understand. God's love is not a theory, and His grace is not a casual gesture. They are the very foundation of life, the essence of our identity, the legal force of heaven working in and through us. You were not created to wander, to wonder, or to merely exist. You were formed by love, chosen by purpose, and restored by grace. Everything about your life is intentional. Everything about your journey has meaning, and everything God has spoken over you, He intends to fulfill. You are not too broken, you are not too late, you are not disqualified. The fact that you are breathing is evidence that God is still invested in your story. His love still calls you, His grace still covers you, His Spirit still equips you. But now the call is not just to receive it. The call is to believe it, to live it, and to speak it, boldly, consistently, and unapologetically. Because when you speak from a place of revelation, you become a voice of restoration. When you speak with conviction rooted in the love and grace of God, chains break, first in you, then through you. You don't just echo what others say, you release what heaven is saying now, and that's how nations are changed. That's how families are healed. That's how purposes are revived. So stand in the confidence of grace. Walk in the authority of love. Speak as one who knows the King, not just His name. Because the world doesn't need another echo. It needs a voice. And when you understand His love, when you are transformed by his grace, you become that voice. Let heaven speak through you.